Welcome to Makeup and Monarchies. My name is Tiffany. I am a cosmetologist, hairstylist, makeup artist, and lover of all things UK history. This week we're going to be talking about, this is like the third episode of our little Edward III era. We're going to talk about Edward the Black Prince. So with that being said, let's just get right on into it. Hello, welcome to Eczema Face of 2024 into winter of 2025. So like I said like a second ago. Also, this may look different and I'm going to be looking all over the place, but I'm trying not to. I'm filming differently. Apologies ahead of time if my eyes are going other places. So today we're talking about Edward the Black Prince. Edward was born on June 15th of 1330. I'm going to put my hair up because at Woodstock Palace in Oxfordshire, he was the first child of Edward III and Philippa of Hainaut. Due to Edward's lineage, the baby Edward, he was in line for the French throne through his mother's claim. Due to Daddy Edward, through his lineage, he was in line for the French throne through his mother's claim, Isabella of France. She was the daughter of Philip IV of France. When baby Prince Edward was a little over a year old, his father proposed marriage between the little prince and the daughter of Philip VI of France. Now, just to set the scene of what Edward was born into, his parents had married 2.5 years prior to his birth. His grandmother, Isabella of France, had her husband, Edward II of England, deposed, and she and her new lover, Roger Mortimer, were regents to the teenage king, Edward III. Daddy Edward, meaning Edward III, had reignited a war with Scotland to take back lost territories that had been captured during Granddaddy Edward's reign. So that would be Edward I. Daddy Edward recaptured these lands and defeated Scotland at the Battle of Halidon Hill in 1330. March 18th, 1333, the 2.5-year-old Prince Edward was invested as the Earl of Chester. So Edward had a tutor by the name of, let me find my brush, Dr. Walter Barley of Merton College in Oxford. His revenues were placed in the hands of his mother, Philippa, in March of 1334 for the expenses she sustained in raising Edward and his sisters, Isabella and Joan. The rumor mill started churning in August of 35 about an impending war or an impending French invasion, and this led to the king ordering that he and his household should go to Nottingham Castle for safety. February 9th of 1337, Edward becomes Duke of Cornwall. This was the earliest instance of the creation of a duke in England. At the end of that year, two cardinals tried to make peace between the king Edward III and Philip VI of France. Edward supposedly met with them outside London. He was accompanied by many nobles and escorted them to his father. July 11th of 38, before he left England for Flanders, the king appointed Edward guardian of the kingdom during his time away. So Edward was 8 at the time. The following year, Daddy Edward proposed marriage between Prince Edward and Margaret, daughter of Duke John III of Brabant. This marriage never came to fruition. He was appointed guardian again in 40, so he's now almost 10. And once again, October 6th of 42, he was made guardian again. In the latter of the two appointments, he was too young to take any part aside from ceremonial parts. So everything else was carried out by the council. On May 12th of 43, Daddy Edward created Prince Edward, the Prince of Wales, right before his 13th birthday. This was done in a parliament held at Westminster, and he was invested with a circlet, gold ring, and a silver rod. Edward went with his father to Sluisen on July 3rd of 45. There, the king tried to persuade the magistrates of Ghent, Bruges, and Bray to accept Prince Edward as their lord. However, the murder of Jacob van Artevelde put an end to this. Jacob was a political leader in Ghent and ruled semi-dictatorly. After rumors began that he was going to recognize Edward, Prince Edward, as the Count of Flanders, there was suspicion of embezzlement, and he was excommunicated by the Pope. He was killed by an angry mob on July 24th of 45. In September and the following April, he was called on to raise troops in his principality and earldom for the campaign in France. I know this looks crazy right now and it looks like I have black eyes, and I know I'm not looking at the camera when I say that. It is November and it is cranberry season here in New England, so I'm going for cranberry look. And I know it's not doing much for the eczema all under my eyes. I'm going to go in with black out in here in the outer corners, and not heavy black, but just a lighter touch of black just to deepen that. I did see a really pretty look online today, and that's kind of where I'm going with this. So just like this outer V of the eye, and I'm going to pull it down to my lower lid to carry that through. Now I do have that cranberry color still on the fluffy end of this Anastasia brush. I'm going to pull, if you see, I'm looking at myself in the camera right now, but if you can see here, see how I'm sloping down a little bit here? I'm going to pull this back up because it's going to make my eyes droop downward, and I'd rather pull them up. I'm actually going to come out with this some more, pulling that color out. Now I have enough left on this, like that cranberry color, that I can do that with. Then I go back in with that first transition color and just soften the edge of that like that. Getting back to it. So Prince Edward took on a lot of debt because of this, and his father had him make out a will so that if he died in war, his executors would get all of his earnings for a year. Shortly after Edward's 16th birthday, he went with his father. So I'm going to do that on this side. I'm going to pull what I was just doing on the other side is I pulled that up, but I'm just going to kind of start that process from the bottom this time so I can get a better guideline. You'll see the difference. I can go back in over here and just kind of touch up. So Prince Edward went with his father, and as soon as they landed at La Hoyt, so he received knighthood by his father at the Church of Retihu. The Battle of Cressy took place on August 26th of 46. Now, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of this battle, but Edward was attacked, but he wasn't mortally wounded. However, when Daddy Edward found out that his son was fine, he refused to send help in because he basically wanted his son to prove himself. Prince Edward was thrown to the ground in the battle, or during the battle, and he was saved by Sir Richard Fitzsimon. England ended up winning this battle, and King Edward embraced his son and claimed that he had acquitted himself loyally. I'm just going to deepen this a little bit more, and then I'll go back and blend this out. So even though I'm using black, I can go back in with this cranberry color, and I'm sorry I have not looked at the color name yet. It'll be listed in the description box down below. I'm just going to soften that black a little bit, and then I can go back in with a finer, a liner brush, and make that line a little bit darker, on the edges. I know it looks like I have two black eyes right now. I do apologize. We're getting there. 8 days later, Edward was present at the Siege of Calais, which this lasted for over a year. He returned to England on October 12th of 47 and took part in the jousts and other happenings at court. He was invested with the new Order of the Garter by his father. So Edward became a father for the first time in 1350. He and his mistress, Edith Willisford, had a son. The boy's name was Roger Clarendon. He lived to be about 52, and he got himself into a shitty situation and was beheaded for it. I'm not going to go fully into that, but you can look him up, and I don't even know if I'll ever cover him. Maybe I will. Maybe I will do a video on all the illegitimate children. Anywho, okay, so now I'm going to go in with a frosted cranberry color. Again, it'll be listed down below. I don't know the name of this one. My apologies. And because it's frosted, I'm going to just pat this on my lid. I don't want to swipe because it'll cause fallout. If you can see, I'm going to come into the corner with this. So Daddy Edward was determined to renew the war with France in 55. So he ordered Edward to lead an army to Aquitaine. This expedition was made along with the request for some of the Gascon lords who were excited for a raid. On July 10th, the king appointed Edward as his lieutenant in Gascony and gave him powers to act in his place and receive homage. Edward and his force basically went through France and ransacked, pillaging, burning, and killing their way through it. While he was on this awful street, a messenger came to him from the papal court and urged him to allow negotiations for peace. Edward told the messenger that he could do nothing without his father's will. He didn't rest and he kept moving. Okay, so next I'm going to go in. This is the Sultry palette from Anastasia. I know it's old as hell, but it's still good. I'm going to use Rose Quartz like in this inner lid area, just a little bit over it to brighten it, like so. So the Battle of Poitiers, French is not my expert language, takes place on September of 35. This was a huge victory for England. They had lost a small amount of men, just like I have lost this. No, did I find it? No, I didn't. I lost my brush. Oh, there it is. France lost anywhere between 6,000 to 8,000 men. John II of France was brought to Edward, and he was very kind to John. He helped him take his armor off and spoke to him very kindly. There's a lot happening during this battle, and I'm not going to bore you with battle. Edward had taken John as prisoner and went back to London with him. John rode in on a white charger. No, not the car, the horse that the car is named after. Edward rode in on a small black hackney, which is another type of horse. This show of humility appears to have been an honor to John, and it magnified the glory of Daddy Edward III. The Edwardian era of the 100 Years' War was coming to an end, like my patience with my skin. Things were a bit quiet, and so the court was celebrating. There were festivals and jousts held, gifts were given, but this put them into massive debt. On October 10th of 61, Edward married his cousin, Joan, Countess of Kent, at the age of 31. So I'm just going to go through now, and I'm just deepening all that, the black. I'm just going to pull this out a little bit more, and I'm going to deepen that black crease in here just to give it a little bit more definition. Now, if you do this and you go too dark, you can always go back in with the color that you used before it to soften it out. Joan was the daughter of Edmund of Woodstock and Margaret, daughter of Philip III of France. Edmund of Woodstock was the youngest son of Edward I. So I know this gets a little bit confusing. Yes, they were related. Obviously, they were cousins. But moving on. Joan was 33 at the time, and she was a widow twice over and had 3 children. She had 5 children with her first husband. I'm going to assume that only 3 were surviving at this. Anyways, a papal dispensation was required, and it looks like they married before it was applied for, and they were wed at Windsor Castle by Simon Islip, Archbishop of Canterbury. Apparently, they became engaged without the king's knowledge, but he was present for the wedding day. The new couple lived in Berkhamsted Castle in Hertfordshire. So I'm just going to go in with this black and deepen. I just did what I was trying not to do. So I'm going to go back in and soften that line out some more with going back into that cranberry color so I can soften that. I'm going to do it over here too, just to... I also want a little bit more of this it's hard for me to see too because I'm in the dark. That's so much better. So I'm going to go back over that lid area. The following July, he was named Prince of Aquitaine and Gascony by his father. He spent the rest of the year preparing for his upcoming trip to his new principality. Edward and Joan left for Aquitaine and Gascony in February of 63. They landed in La Rochelle, and they were met by John Chandos. He traveled the area and received homage from the local lords. They were graciously received, and Edward and Joan resided in Bordeaux and sometimes Angoulême. I'm going to do my liner. So Edward played the political game pretty well and made quite a name for himself. His marriage was going well too. I'm just waiting because this is on its last. I'm in the dregs of this foundation. Yeah, why did I put it on this one? Joan gave birth to their first child in 1365. It was a boy named, you guessed it, Edward. They had another son in 1367, and his name was Richard. This lighting is not good. And I have a ring light going too. Look like a ghost. At the time of his birth, Edward was lured, or at the time of Richard's birth, Edward was lured into another battle, this time with King Peter of Castile. This battle became one of Edward's greatest victories. The aftermath of this victory was not so great. Edward stayed and waited to get his money. His men suffered from dysentery and other diseases, and a lot of men died. Edward got sick as well at this time and never really recovered. Henry Trastamara made a war in Aquitaine, and Edward returned. So Edward's forces assembled some 6,000 men. Edward had promised them money, but he hadn't paid up yet. So these men started causing absolute mayhem. He asked them to leave, but the damage was done. This royally, pun possibly intended, pissed off Charles V. He also had made promises, or he had also promised money to the men of the Lord of Bray, which also wasn't paid. Bray agreed to marry Margaret, the sister to the Queen of France. Because of the campaigns and the extravagant living, Edward had some financial difficulties. So when he got back to Bordeaux, he called an assembly of the estates of Aquitaine to try and get a grant. Nothing came from this. So he tried with the estates of Angoulême and talked them into allowing him a hearth tax of 10 sous for 5 years. I'm assuming that's what that means, how that's pronounced. This is a spelling. The order of the tax was published on January 25th of 68. This tax really pissed off a lot of the lords, so they went to the king and filed complaints. Edward was called Terrace, but he said he'd only go because the king asked, and that he would have a helmet on and 60,000 men in his company. Edward had caused the messengers to be imprisoned, and this stirred up some shit again. He called for his friend John Chandos, and he came to help. Some fighting happened, but no war was declared. Because John's health was declining, he couldn't take part in the fighting. Come March 18th of 1369, more than 900 towns, castles, and other locations showed in one way or another their loyalty to the French crown or the French cause. War was declared in April of 69, and with naval support from Castile, the English were defeated in 72. Edward left Aquitaine and returned to England after the death of his oldest son, Edward of Angoulême, in September of 1370. Baby Edward was only 5. Edward was in grief and his health was declining. He interceded a treaty between his father and Charles of Navarre and stopped it. On May 2nd of 71, he met with the Convocation of Canterbury and talked them into making an exceptionally big grant. So he started to recover from his illness, and he went with his father to Thoin. This is the spelling, apologies, by boat. The winds were not in their favor, and they never reached the French coast. October 6th, he resigned the Principality of Aquitaine and Gascony. Edward's illness reared its ugly head. Come April 28th of 76, he was the chief support of the Common in their attack on the abuses of the administration. Apparently, he was of the same opinion of William of Wickham and opposed the influence of his brother John of Gaunt. He had good cause to be in fear that his brother's power would be dangerous to the path of his son, Richard. Edward III's daddy Edward, his financial agent Richard Lyons, sent him a bribe of £1,000 and other gifts, and he refused them. Some family drama in here. See, this is not new. Everybody's dealt with this. Edward's illness got really bad. He became weak and he would faint, and he knew that the end was near. He had left gifts for his servants and had said goodbye to his father. He also asked him to pay off his debts and protect his son Richard. Edward died on June 8th of 1376 at Westminster Palace in London. He was buried in Canterbury Cathedral on September 29th. I'm going to jump off and I'm going to do my mascara. So, first fun fact for Edward is the nickname the Black Prince wasn't something he was called in his day. It's speculated that this nickname comes from him wearing black armor, but there is no evidence to this. He was in a full suit of armor at the age of 7. I can't even comprehend that. Lastly, Edward helped win 2 of the most significant battles during the 100 Years' War, and those were the Battle of Crécy and the Battle of Poitiers. That's all I have for this week. I hope if you stuck it through to the end, thank you. I was on the struggle bus this week. Thank you for sticking it. So if you have not done so yet, please make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. And if you like this, give it a thumbs up. If I messed up anything or if you would like to make a comment, please leave that. That really helps with the algorithm. If you haven't also done this, you can head on over to Instagram, TikTok, Threads, as I count out on my ratchet nails, and Blue Sky, and follow me there at Makeup and Monarchies. Also, if you enjoy this and you'd like to help support me doing this, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Makeup and Monarchies and contribute to my Starbucks fund. Okay, that's all I have for this week. I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to see you in the next one. Have a great week. Have a great one, guys. Thank you so much. Bye.